They called it the blooding ground. Not to its face, of course. To its face, it was the Xylos 7 Proving Grounds, a state-of-the-art training facility orbiting a dead star. But a name like that doesn't stick when you're watching a cadet get bisected by a creature that shouldn't exist in any sane universe. It's a name born from fear, the kind you taste in the back of your throat, metallic and sharp. I was there that day, the day the Predator came. My name is Ilara Vance, and I was a senior tactical analyst for the Galactic Alliance. My job was to watch, to assess, to quantify the potential of the Alliance's future commanders. I spent my days in the climate-controlled observation deck, a bubble of sterile, recyclable air and the soft hum of holographic displays. It was my sanctuary, my God's-eye view of controlled chaos down on the surface. The cadets on the ground were the best of the best, Ursans, Valyrians, the stoic Cathari, genetically and technologically perfected beings who could bench press a small shuttle and run algorithmic battle simulations in their sleep. Or so we were told. Down below on the rust-red surface of Xylos 7, reality was a different, more brutal equation. The air had a faint, acrid tang of ozone and sulfur, permanently etched into the atmosphere by the dying sun. The ground was a cracked, unforgiving expanse of ancient volcanic rock, offering little cover. It was a perfect testing ground, they said. No room for error, no chance for cowardice. And the prize for surviving the final trial. A ticket to the front lines of the Chimeran War, a conflict that was bleeding the galaxy dry. The trial was a hunter-killer exercise. They would release a single, genetically engineered predator, a bioweapon leftover from a war long before our time, and the squad of 6 cadets had to track it, contain it, and terminate it. Today's squad was considered the most promising class in a decade, a squad built for glory. There was Jax, the Valyrian. He was like a statue carved from polished amethyst, his skin holding a faint, bioluminescent sheen. His people were known for their grace in combat, for their ability to process combat data faster than any known species. Jax didn't walk, he flowed, a predator himself. I'd watched him during simulations. He'd predict an enemy's move a full 2 seconds before they made it, his bladed gauntlets moving in a blur. His confidence was his armor, and it was thick. Then there was Eskri, a Cathari warrior. A being of chitin and bone, his massive frame was built like a walking tank. The Cathari came from a world of crushing gravity and ferocious predators. They didn't just survive, they thrived on adversity. He carried a massive, pulse-fused maul, a weapon that could dent a frigate's hull, and he was eager to use it. I remember his translator crackling, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble. It is only a beast. I have faced beasts on Cathar that would turn this one to a whimpering pup. We will break it. And then there were the others. 2 Ursans, massive, fur-covered humanoids with the strength of a tectonic plate, and a Lythan, a small, fragile-looking creature from a low-gravity world, gifted with immense psychic potential. It floated slightly above the ground, its long, whip-like tentacles trailing behind it, a being of pure mental energy. They were a perfect unit on paper, a balanced combination of brawn, speed, and mind. The 80th Quadrant of the Galactic Fleet was watching. Admirals and commanders from a dozen star systems were present on the observation deck, their eyes glued to the massive holoscreen that dominated the room. The mood was confident, almost bored. This was a formality, a coronation of the galaxy's new elite. The High Command, a gaggle of decorated old men in crisp, white uniforms, were already murmuring about postings and commendations. I sat in my usual corner, my personal haptic interface linked to the myriad of diagnostic sensors on the ground. I was running a preliminary analysis on the Predator, designated Alpha Strain 7. The data was disconcerting. It was a nightmarish mix of genetic code, a biological weapon from a civilization that had mastered the art of war and little else. Its DNA was a patchwork quilt of the most lethal apex predators in the known galaxies. It was faster than a Valyrian, stronger than a Cathari, and more resilient than a hive ship. My fingers began to tremble, an involuntary reaction I quickly suppressed. "The biological matrix is unstable, Commander," I transmitted to the officer in charge of the exercise. His name was Commander Thorne, a human with a military bearing so rigid you could use it as a ruler. "The regenerative properties are off the charts. I'd recommend a re-evaluation of the squad's containment protocols." Commander Thorne didn't even look at me. His voice was clipped, efficient, and utterly dismissive. "We have a 99.8% success rate, Analyst Vance. The specimen is a test, not an execution. The cadets have been briefed. The Lythan will suppress its higher cognitive functions. It's a standard containment procedure." A standard procedure. That's what they called a death sentence. The release was silent, a single drop pod punching through the thin atmosphere, landing with a cloud of rust-colored dust just over a ridge from the squad. The cadets moved into formation instantly. Textbook. Jax took point, a scout drone humming silently above his head, feeding data directly into his cerebral implant. The Ursans flanked him, their hulking forms creating a wall of flesh and fur. Escree brought up the rear, his maul held high. The Lythan floated in the center, its mind a silent beacon. "Contact in 300 meters, Jax announced. "It knows we're here, moving to intercept." That's when I saw the numbers on my display spike. The creature wasn't just moving, it was teleporting in short, erratic bursts. My screen flickered with impossible energy readings. It was blurring the laws of physics, as if it found them an inconvenience. "Commander, I have an anomaly. It's—" The first scream cut me off. It wasn't a human sound. It was a Cathari death rattle, a sound like breaking stones. The Ursans on point had vanished. One moment they were there, two mountains of muscle and fur. The next, they were a mist of red and pink, a cloud of vapor that hung in the air for a moment too long before being blown away by the wind. The creature wasn't a beast. It was a living force of nature. It emerged from behind an outcropping of rock, a fluid nightmare silhouette. It was a twisted symphony of blades and sinew. Its body was a chameleon of death, its skin shimmering and shifting, absorbing the light around it. It moved with an unnatural, fluid grace, legs coiled like springs, a tail tipped with a serrated bone blade leaving a scorch mark in the rock. The sounds it made were a nightmare. Clicks, whispers, and a low, guttural hum that vibrated in your chest and made your teeth ache. Jax, who had been a statue of confidence, moved. He was beautiful to watch, a blur of purple light and razor-sharp blades. He flowed around the creature, his twin blades a spinning web of death. He was fast, faster than I'd ever seen him. He sliced the creature's flank, a wound that would have disemboweled a small starfighter. The creature reeled, a hiss of pain escaping its many-jawed maw. But the wound closed in a second, a shimmer of cellular regeneration, leaving no mark. Jax stepped back, his composure cracking for the first time. His eyes, usually pools of cold calculation, were wide with disbelief. He'd aimed for its heart. He'd hit it, and it had done nothing. Escree bellowed a war cry, a sound that had made his ancestors tremble. He charged, his maul swinging in a devastating arc that could shatter a bunker. The creature met his charge. It didn't dodge. It parried. With a casual flick of its tail, it deflected the maul, the impact sending a shockwave through the ground. It moved inside Escree's guard, its claws extended. There was a sickening sound of tearing chitin, and Escree was thrown back. A huge gash carved across his chest, his ichor sizzling as it hit the rock. The Lythan was its next target. I saw it in the telemetry. The creature's brain activity changed. It became a harmonic spike. It was screaming on a psychic frequency. It was jamming the Lythan's mind, overwhelming its delicate neural network. The Lythan began to convulse, its ethereal body flickering. It let out a silent, psychic shriek that I could feel even in the observation deck, a wave of pure agony. Then it simply collapsed, a limp form floating aimlessly in the gravity. Now it was just Jax and Escree. They fought back to back, a desperate, last stand of two of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They gave the creature all they had. They used plasma grenades, high-frequency blades, even a personal force field that could withstand an asteroid impact. The creature absorbed it all. It let out a laugh, a series of clicks and whistles that sounded like pure amusement. It was toying with them. I could only watch, my hands trembling on the console. I could see the terror in Jax's eyes. The 99.8% success rate had just become a 0% survival rate. I called out again, my voice sharp, panicked. "Commander, we need to evacuate. That thing isn't a test, it's a slaughterhouse." Thorne finally turned, his face pale. He saw it. Everyone saw it. There was no victory here. There was only a slow, terrible death. "The squad must complete the mission," he whispered, a ghost of a directive. "The protocols." "The protocols are a death warrant," I shouted, my voice echoing in the sterile space. I didn't care about my career anymore. I just saw two kids who were about to be killed. Jax made a desperate gamble. He feinted left and drove his blade deep into the creature's side, aiming for a weak point in its genetic matrix that my analysis had suggested was a vulnerable node. He was right. The creature faltered, a spasm of pain rippling through its form. It was a second of vulnerability. It was their only chance. But the creature's tail was faster. In a blinding flash of motion, the serrated blade shot out and pierced Jax's leg. He screamed, the first and only sound of pain I'd ever heard from him. He went down on one knee. Escree, roaring with rage, lunged forward to cover him, his massive body a shield. The creature's claws raked across his faceplate, blinding him. It was over, they were done. In the observation deck, there was no sound. The admirals were frozen, their perfect world shattered. We were witnessing a miracle of death. The creature stood over them, its form rippling with dark energy. It was savoring the moment. This was the end of the galaxy's best. This was a declaration of war from a dead civilization, a final joke from a race that had destroyed itself. And then from the dust and the chaos, a new figure emerged. He was the only human in the squad. I hadn't mentioned him before. He didn't stand out. Next to the purple Valyrian and the armored Cathari, he was a pale, fragile-looking creature in standard-issue black body armor. His designation was Cadet Leo. His file said he was an engineer, a specialist in pulse weaponry maintenance. He was the squad's support staff, the guy who fixed the guns. The one everyone forgot about. He'd been pinned down by debris, unnoticed by the creature. He stood up, his face covered in dust, his eyes wide with a horror that was all too human. He was shaking. "Run," Jax yelled, his voice strained with pain. "Get to the transport, Cadet. That's an order, we'll hold it." But Leo didn't run. He stood frozen for a moment, his gaze locked on the wounded cadets, then on the creature. He looked down at the tool he was holding, a simple, heavy-duty plasma welder used for maintenance, not combat. It wasn't a weapon. It was a tool. He looked back at the monster, its jaws dripping with Escree's ichor, its form a nightmare made flesh. It was the epitome of alien power, a creature that had just torn through the finest the galaxy had to offer. And then, in an action that defied all logic, all training, all survival instinct, Leo took a step forward. And then another. He walked towards the creature, his tool held limply at his side. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't posturing. He was walking. The creature turned its attention to him. It was a predator and it had found a new prey, but it paused. There was a curiosity in its posture, a head tilt. The human wasn't running. He wasn't screaming. He was walking towards it. The creature let out a low, rumbling growl, a sound of warning. It was a sound that would make a Valyrian commander soil his armor. It was a sound of death. Leo kept walking. His steps were small, but they were steady. He was muttering something under his breath. I couldn't hear it, but I could see his lips moving. He was talking to himself. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. It's just a machine, it's just a program, a malfunction, that's all it is. A malfunctioning program. The creature took a step towards him, its claws extended. It was ready to strike. I saw the muscle fibers in its legs coil, a prelude to a leap that would end the human's life. Leo stopped. He reached a trembling hand up to his ear and unclipped his comms unit. He held it out in front of him, a simple piece of human technology, a mesh of metal and wire. "Stop," he said. The creature froze. It wasn't the word, it was the frequency. An ultrasonic frequency, a subaudible tone that had just been broadcast directly from Leo's comms. A technical glitch, a malfunction, but the creature didn't know that. The creature didn't see a weapon, it saw a command from a strange, new being that didn't know how to fight. It was as if someone had hit the pause button on the universe. The creature remained frozen, its head cocked, its many eyes blinking. It wasn't defeated. It wasn't cowed. It was confused. And then slowly its posture shifted. The menace drained from it. The aggression was replaced by a wary curiosity. Its form shimmered and I could see its energy readings drop. It was powering down, de-escalating. It looked at Leo, and then in a moment that still haunts my dreams, it did the unthinkable. It lowered its massive head. It bowed. Part 2, the echo of a ghost. The silence that followed was a physical force. You could hear a person's eyelid flicker in the observation deck. The admirals, the commanders, the analysts, we were all frozen, a tableau of disbelief carved in flesh and bone. The creature, this engine of destruction, this biological nightmare, stood in the dust, its terrifying head bowed low before a shaking human holding a piece of scrap metal. It wasn't a surrender. It was an act of subjugation, of profound, almost religious recognition. Commander Thorne was the first to break the spell. His voice, when it came through the speakers, was a high-pitched, reedy whisper that didn't sound like his own. "Cadet Leo, what have you done?" There was no answer from Leo. He was still standing there, staring at the creature, his hand still outstretched with the comms unit. He looked as surprised as the rest of us. He looked absolutely terrified. He was probably wondering if he was about to be eaten. He was just an engineer who'd watched his friends get torn apart. He was running on pure adrenaline and a desperate, illogical hope. Get everyone to the transport," I finally yelled, snapping out of my daze. My voice was shrill, urgent, echoing in the silent chamber. I was screaming at the empty air, at the holographic images of the squad on the ground. "Get them out of there, now." My outburst seemed to break the paralysis in the command center. Operators scrambled, their hands flying over their consoles. A transport shuttle, a sleek, armored vessel, screamed down from orbit, its engines flaring. It landed 100 meters from the tableau. Jax and Escree, still bleeding, were hauled to their feet by the Urson retrieval team. They were a mess, but their eyes were locked on Leo and the creature. Escree was muttering something in his own tongue, his voice a broken growl. I didn't need a translator to understand the awe and confusion in his tone. The creature didn't move. It didn't follow Leo. It just watched him with those huge, dark, intelligent eyes. It was as if it had found a signal it had been searching for its whole life, a purpose, a master. The retrieval team didn't dare go near it. They knew what it could do. They'd just seen the proof. They focused on getting the remaining cadets onto the transport. Leo was the last to move. He slowly lowered his hand and took a step back. The creature's head rose slightly, its posture shifting from one of obeisance to one of alert attention. It was watching his every move. "That's it," Leo whispered, his voice cracking, perhaps trying to comfort it, perhaps trying to comfort himself. "Stay, stay." He backed away slowly, his eyes never leaving the creature. He didn't turn his back on it. He wasn't that brave. When he was close enough, he scrambled into the transport, and the shuttle's rear ramp slammed shut with a hiss of hydraulics. The creature stood there in the dust, watching the shuttle ascend. It didn't make a sound. It didn't pursue. It just watched until the shuttle was a speck in the orange sky. Then it dissolved back into the shadows from whence it came, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of its reign of terror. The journey back to the flagship, the Vindicator, was a blur of medical emergencies and hushed, frantic conversations. In the medbay, I watched the doctors work on Jax and Escree. They would live, but Jax would carry a limp. His graceful stride, the thing that defined him, was gone forever. Escree would need new eyes. His body would heal, but his pride never would. They were both silent, not from pain, but from a profound, humbling shock. Leo was in the observation bay, a private room with a view of the stars. He was sitting on the edge of a metal bench, staring at his hands. He was still in his dusty armor. A medic had cleaned the grime from his face, revealing a young man, perhaps 22 or 23, with a shock of dark hair and intelligent, haunted eyes. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like an exhausted kid who just survived a nightmare. The doors to the observation bay hissed open, and the room was suddenly filled with the brass. Admirals, commanders, scientists, they all came, a parade of long, important titles and even longer, more important faces. One of them, Admiral Kor, a Valyrian with skin the color of old bronze and a voice that could command a star fleet, stepped forward. He looked like he'd swallowed a live grenade. "Explain," he commanded. It wasn't a question. It was a demand for a logistical report. Leo blinked, looking from the admiral to the other officers. "Explain what, sir?" His voice was soft, tired. The admiral gestured with a three-fingered hand at the hollow display showing the creature. "That, the display on the proving grounds. You stopped the Alpha strain. How?" It was the question everyone wanted the answer to. They didn't want a hero. They wanted a scientific breakthrough. They wanted a new weapon they could mass-produce. They wanted to know the secret to controlling the thing that had just broken their best cadets. Leo rubbed the back of his neck, a very human gesture of discomfort. I don't know, sir. It was a glitch. My comms unit. It started broadcasting a high-frequency signal. The power coupling was damaged during the attack. It must have been an accidental broadcast." It was a perfectly reasonable answer. It was a scientific explanation. It was the truth. But the faces of the admirals changed. The hunger in their eyes faded, replaced by a cold, reptilian disappointment. They didn't want a random glitch. They wanted a key. They wanted power. They saw Leo not as a hero who had acted on instinct, but as a lucky idiot who'd stumbled upon a piece of technology they could reverse engineer. "Glitch," Admiral Kor repeated, the word tasting like poison. "So there is no secret. It was a malfunction." "It looks that way, sir," Leo said, his shoulders slumping. "He was just a kid. He didn't know what he'd done. He didn't know what he'd unleashed." The admirals left, muttering among themselves. They didn't even thank him. To them, he was just a variable that had been accidentally solved. The real answer was in the technology. The real victory was in understanding the frequency. But I knew different. I'd seen something that day, something the data didn't show. The creature wasn't just reacting to a frequency. It was reacting to the source of the frequency. It was reacting to the person holding the transmitter. In all its millennia of engineered hatred, in all its biological programming to kill, 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 something had broken. It had seen a being that wasn't afraid to walk towards it. A being that wasn't trying to fight it but was trying to understand it. It had seen a human. And it had bowed. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the footage in my head. The creature's bow, it wasn't a sign of defeat. It was a sign of recognition. It was like a wild animal seeing a god. I had to talk to Leo. I had to understand what he was thinking in that moment. I found him in the mess hall, alone at a small table, staring at a cup of cold coffee. The room was vast and empty, the hum of the ship's engines the only sound. He looked up as I approached, a weary smile touching his lips. "Analyst Vance," he said, "I'm not in the mood for a debrief." "This isn't a debrief," I said, sliding into the seat opposite him. This is me trying to understand what happened today. I saw you walk towards that thing. I saw you talk to it. I saw you connect. What were you thinking? He stared at me for a long moment. His eyes were the eyes of a man who'd seen too much, who'd lived too long in a short time. I was thinking, he said slowly, his voice barely a whisper, that it was just a scared animal. It was acting out its programming. It was a soldier just like us. It didn't ask to be made. It didn't ask to be a weapon. He paused, taking a sip of his cold coffee. He grimaced but didn't put the cup down. It was a tool, I countered. A deadly efficient tool. Yeah, Leo said, his eyes hardening a little. That's what they want us to believe. That's the Alliance doctrine, right? Anything alien is a threat. Anything unknown is a weapon, but I watched it fight. It wasn't just killing. It was studying. It was making decisions. It was afraid of me. It was confused. It didn't know what I was, so it tried to understand. He set the cup down and leaned forward. He was a completely different person now. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, unsettling conviction. Everyone else saw a monster, he said. I saw a ghost from a war that ended thousands of years ago, a program that was never told to stop. It was lost, Ilara. It was looking for a purpose, looking for something to follow, and I gave it one. I gave it a moment of clarity. I shivered. His words were terrifying in their simplicity. He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a general. He was just a human who had looked a predator in the eye and seen the loneliness behind its claws. The next few days were a nightmare of bureaucracy. The High Command wanted to send a retrieval team to capture the creature. They wanted to dissect it, to understand its technology. They were obsessed. They saw it as a potential superweapon. Leo was horrified. You can't do that, he argued. You'll only make it angry again. You'll undo what happened. You'll kill us all. You saved us once with a glitch, Cadet, Admiral Core said coldly. We intend to make sure we don't have to rely on luck again. The retrieval team was assembled. A squad of elite soldiers, including a very reluctant Jax and Escree, who were still healing. They were ordered to return to Xylos 7, track the creature, and neutralize it for capture. They launched the next day. I watched from the observation deck, a sick feeling in my gut. The team landed on the proving grounds, their weapons drawn, their scanners sweeping the area. It was a textbook operation. They moved with precision, a perfect machine of war. And then the creature appeared. It didn't attack. It didn't flee. It just appeared, a shimmer in the air, and stood in the middle of a clearing, watching them. It was waiting. The retrieval team, emboldened by their superior firepower and their confidence, advanced. They were confident. They had the frequency weapon, a modified comms unit that was supposed to pacify the creature. The lead soldier, a hulking Urson, raised the device and activated the frequency. A high-pitched whine filled the air. The creature twitched, a flicker of confusion in its eyes. But it didn't bow, it didn't submit. It looked at the device, then at the soldier holding it. It saw a man trying to control it. It saw a cage. It saw a lie. The creature's form shimmered. It was a blur of motion, a scream of tearing metal, and then silence. The retrieval team was gone, all of them. Not a single trace, just a cloud of vapor and a feeling of profound, final death. The creature stood in the center of the carnage, unharmed, its many eyes scanning the sky. It was looking for something. It was looking for a signal. It was looking for Leo. That evening the flagship was a tomb. The admirals were silent, their plans in ruins. They had tried to tame a god, and they had paid the price. Leo was in his quarters, a small, cramped room. I went to see him. He was sitting on his bunk, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his face a mask of sorrow. "They're all dead," he whispered, "because of me." "No," I said, sitting down beside him. "Because of them, they didn't listen. They saw a weapon, not a living thing." He shook his head. "I gave it a purpose, I gave it hope, and then they tried to take it away." He looked at me, his eyes burning with a new kind of fire. It was a fire of responsibility, of understanding. "I have to go back," he said. "Leo, that's insane. It'll kill you." "No, it won't," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It was looking for me, Alara. It was calling for me. That's why they died. It thought they were trying to replace me." He stood up. He was just a kid, but in that moment he looked like the oldest being in the galaxy. "I gave it a command," he said. "I gave it a purpose, and now I have to fulfill that purpose. I have to show it that my people aren't all the same, that not everyone wants to cage it." He walked to the door, but I grabbed his arm. "You can't just go down there alone," I pleaded. "The creature's DNA is a weapon. It's a biological nightmare. You can't just talk to it. You can't just reason with it." "Maybe not," he said, pulling his arm away gently. "But I have to try. I don't have a choice." He walked out of the room, a lone human walking towards the hangar bay, towards a small shuttle, towards a destiny that no one could have predicted. He didn't have a plan, he didn't have a weapon, he just had hope. I ran after him. I wanted to stop him, I wanted to protect him, but I couldn't. He took a shuttle. He flew it down to Xylos 7, ignoring all the frantic hails from command. He landed on the same spot where the retrieval team had been destroyed. He stepped out of the shuttle, alone and unarmed. The creature was there. It had been waiting. It emerged from the shadows, its massive form dwarfing the human. The air around it shimmered with heat and menace. It was a predator. It was a nightmare. It was death incarnate. Leo stood his ground. He looked up at the creature, his face pale, his hands trembling. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice carrying on the thin air. "I'm sorry they tried to trap you. They didn't understand. They thought you were a monster. They were wrong." The creature shifted. It tilted its head, a gesture of recognition. It remembered the signal. It remembered the human. "We're not all like that," Leo said, taking a step forward. "I don't want to fight you. I don't want to use you. I want to understand. I want to help." The creature took a step closer. It was close enough to touch him now. And then slowly it lowered its massive head. It let out a low, rumbling sound, not a growl of aggression, but something else. A sigh, a release, a moment of acceptance. It bowed. Leo reached out a trembling hand and placed it on the creature's head, on the rough, shifting surface of its hide. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you." And in that moment, a new alliance was born. Not one of force, not one of fear, but one of trust. The human and the beast. A symbiosis of heart and fang. A story that would be told for centuries. The predator beast hunted the strongest cadets, then bowed to the human as its true leader.